You're listening to Bottomshelf Bitcoin, episode 28.
Relax. Enjoy your coffee. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Take a chill pill. Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bottomshelf Bitcoin, the podcast that puts Bitcoin knowledge within everyone's reach. As always, I'm your host, Josh Humphrey, and my guest today is founder of the CryptoCast Network, content creator, and co-founder of the Programming with Bitcoin workshop, Vortex. Vortex, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Josh? It's a pleasure to be here, man.
I am good. So, you recently moved off from the World Crypto Network, and now you've got your own channel that you're doing, and you've got a couple of podcasts or programs going on that, right?
Yeah, actually, I did sort of fork the World Crypto Network and created my own YouTube channel there, which is called the CryptoCast Network, and you can find that at CryptoCast.network. And yeah, we have a few shows on there right now. I am doing the majority of the shows, though. We have the Bitcoin News Show. We have Perspective, which is a show that we interview people who write articles in the space. We like to give them an opportunity to check that out, or an opportunity to go ahead and explain more about their article. And then we have a show called Decipher, which is interviewing hardware and software developers in the Bitcoin and crypto space.
Very cool. So what, and I'm not looking to start fights or drama here, but was there something in particular that made you say, like, I want to do my own thing?
Oh, no, it was just mostly creative differences. I kind of wanted to create a more of a technical channel, pretty much only have people that are in the space. So only entrepreneurs, developers, people who are building businesses in the space. So people who are focused on, I guess you could say, have skin in the game. And I wanted to really bring their stories to the public, because I think this is really an important time for Bitcoin. This is a formative time for Bitcoin. As I like to tell people, it really is early days. And so I think there's a lot of stories that can be told there. And I really want to focus on the people that are actually working in the space.
Awesome. So give me a little bit of your background, like how long have you been in Bitcoin? What kind of influenced your life before that, and your, maybe some education or whatnot? Sure.
So I've been a software developer for the last 15 years, specifically in ASP.NET, C#. So I've been technically, I guess you call it, a web application developer. Websites as web application development is what I've been doing. And I found Bitcoin in about end of 2012 there. And as everybody, has done when they first found Bitcoin, they dismiss it as, either internet money or internet magic money, right? World of Warcraft gold, as pretty much a non-event. And so I sort of kept it on my radar for about a year or so. Then it was after that when something really, really clicked. Like around the Silk Road time, around the articles where the Silk Road was coming out, this concept of censorship resistance started coming into my mind. And then, of course, from there, you start to go down the rabbit hole, discover Austrian Economics, the whole cypherpunk era, all that good stuff. And so from there is when I really started to click into Bitcoin. And then from there, I started to comment on it on CoinDesk. There was a big community there, coindesk.com, for commenting back in 2014, 2015. And that moved pretty much to Twitter, as the crypto Twitter as we know it today, is where the vast majority of communication happens, despite, of course, what Roger likes to tell you, that it all happens on Reddit. No, the vast majority of communication happens on Twitter when it comes to crypto and Bitcoin. And then, of course, when it comes to actual development, then that is definitely mostly not on Twitter. It's actually on mailing lists, IRC, forums, and of course GitHub communication there. So for the most part, it's I've been in Bitcoin since about 2012, but really only knew kind of what it was towards the middle, the end of 2013, and I got to experience the whole bull and bust market there in 2014, 2015, and it was then where I decided to, in 2015, create a podcast, and that was the Bitcoin News Show. That I put that on the World Crypto Network, and that's sort of been the case ever since. And it's really only last year during the scaling debate when people, I guess, started the majority of people that I have started. The majority of my audience started following me then, because there was a big, huge debate between the user-activated soft fork and SegWit2x, and I was pretty vocal about that, being on one of the sides of the user-activated soft fork, and happened to be pretty correct about a couple of the outcomes. A couple of my predictions came true, of course, which were that the UASF would work, SegWit would get activated, and SegWit2x would be destroyed. So with all that coming to fruition, I decided to think it was time to maybe step out on my own and create my own channel. And now I have a bunch of these shows, and I love to interview people in the space and talk about their stories and about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And so that's where I am right now, working on a CryptoCast Network. And then, of course, in addition to that, I am doing the workshop, the Programming with Bitcoin.com workshop. And so, it's been a pretty great journey. It's really early days still, and I'm just really excited about what's to come next.
Awesome. So, okay, well, since you brought it up, let's jump into your workshop. And you're doing that with Nicolas Dorier, who I had on this show kind of in the early days of this show. I mean, I guess it's still early days, right? We haven't even been a full year on this show yet, but he was one of my first guests. So a lot of love for Nicolas. But
absolutely,
how did you guys
great guy?
How did you guys get hooked up together?
Yeah, so he actually, Nicolas Dorier, I just want to say, he's just a great guy, a super talented programmer. He created the open source library for C# called NBitcoin. And so that's kind of where I started to meet him. I needed NBitcoin for a client of mine. I was doing some development, and I had a couple questions, and Nick was right there, man. He's got his own Slack chat for BTC Pay Server and NBitcoin that you can just anybody go ahead are welcomed in to join and ask questions. And so he was able to help me, and it was then where I was like really impressed with him as a person, as a character. But then about a month or two later, I discovered like BTC Pay Server in addition to just NBitcoin. I just discovered this other software program that he built with NBitcoin called BTC Pay Server, which is this open source merchant processing software that allows anybody to sort of be their own BitPay, to be their own merchant processor. And I thought that was really, really powerful, and it just sort of kept up with that and sort of kept up within the with Nick and the updates in the Slack. And then one thing sort of led to another. I basically just found Jimmy's workshop, and I was like, this is some pretty difficult stuff. Like this is teaching protocol developers to work directly on Bitcoin. This is a very, very, very niche, specialized, highly specialized skill. And so I'm like, well, what about application developers? What about the people who just want to work with Bitcoin and integrate Bitcoin into their current applications for all sorts of for a variety of reasons, right? For accepting Bitcoin as a currency, or for using Bitcoin for timestamping, for example, proof of documents, things like that. So I thought there was a whole audience there that wasn't being served. And so I approached Nick and asked him if he would be interested in helping out with the workshop and teaching to be there as well. And he loved it. He thought it was a great idea. So he gave me the go ahead and create the workshop. So I basically created the workshop based on his library. And we're going to be having our first workshop in Las Vegas, Nevada, September 1st, just a few days away. And so that's kind of how it unfolded. And so far, the response has been great. People have been talking about it on Twitter and social media, and we've been answering people's questions. They've been asking us a few things, and a few things like, when are you guys coming to my city, right? And that's the number one big question. But we're going to try to take it all over the country and eventually all over the world.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask you what determines where you guys go.
So really, it's just kind of at this point, we're trying to hit major metropolitan areas that have C# activity. So, San Francisco is a big city for something like Udemy, right? To be able to do games and 3D design with C#. And we're going to hit Seattle, which of course is Microsoft capital, right? That's where Microsoft is. So there's a lot of C# developers over there. But really, it's just kind of where people are asking us to go. That's the biggest thing, is we're going where people want us to go.
Awesome. So you kind of mentioned Jimmy Song's program or his workshop. And you kind of talked about this, but give me a little more context. Like, what's the difference between what you guys have going on and then what he's doing?
Sure. Yeah. So Jimmy's been doing this workshop. It's called Programming Blockchain. He's been doing that for, I think, over a year now. I mean, it's been highly successful. A lot of students. I think he pulls in like 30, 40 students now per workshop. And then he also has, I think, some online attend as well. So he's really training a lot of developers, which is great, to work on Bitcoin and blockchain. So the big difference is that, so Jimmy's workshop is actually going to get you into the underlying mathematical fundamentals, going to teach you about elliptic curve cryptography, literally teach you the mathematics around this stuff so that you can program software to actually directly work with this type of, these types of mathematics and this type of software. But it becomes really difficult because there's only a select amount of people that even, have the capability to work on something like this, let alone, how much, I guess you could say, how much people actually are really in the talent pool for this. So because, Bitcoin and blockchain, they really combine so many facets. It really is multifaceted. So they combine all these disciplines like cryptography, economics, mathematics, computer science, all of these great things. So I believe that there's just a whole huge more amount of people out there that are application developers that would probably be better suited, to work with this technology than just protocol developers. So Jimmy's doing a great job, and that's what's great is that our courses are very complementary because again, Jimmy's is teaching developers to work directly on Bitcoin, to work with the underlying cryptography, right, of Bitcoin, to be able to even maybe build their own library for Bitcoin or their library that has to do with Bitcoin. So what my course does is it teaches people how to use a library and Bitcoin with their current applications. So it targets C# developers. So you have to be, a C# developer to work with this library. But the fundamentals you get here can be applied to any other language. But the big difference is that we're teaching application developers to work with Bitcoin instead of teaching protocol developers to work on Bitcoin. So for example, in Bitcoin, to create a new transaction, right? You type in new transaction, and then you give it a few properties. But with Jimmy's course, he's going to actually teach you the script, the actual Bitcoin opcode script, and in the Python language to be able to actually write these transactions from scratch. Where with NBitcoin, most of that complexity is abstracted away in this library. That's what some of the genius of this NBitcoin library that Nicola created is to abstract away a lot of this complexity so that application developers just have to worry about the basics, fundamentals, right? To send a transaction, to receive a transaction, to verify that a transaction is valid, various things like that, right? And to sign various documents and to sign transactions, just some of these basic things, without having to know all the underlying cryptography, all the underlying mathematics that is actually supplying this type of complexity. So that's the big thing, is that it really allows developers, application developers specifically, to begin integrating Bitcoin a lot easier than actually working on Bitcoin itself.
Very cool. So like someone who already has an existing project and they want to integrate Bitcoin, or they want to streamline their process, and you're teaching them more or less like how to make that bridge without having to be hiring a protocol developer for their company or something like that.
Absolutely. And here's the big difference. So Jimmy's big exercise is to actually have you write your own library. Write your own library to be able to work with Bitcoin. What our big exercise is to simply write a wallet, right? We're not going to teach you how the underlying mathematical cryptography to create your own library, but we are going to teach you what you need to be able to work with Bitcoin, which is, for example, build a wallet, because a wallet, it has all the basics down. It allows you to send a transaction, receive a transaction, sign a transaction, do multi-sig transactions, and even sign documents and various things like that. So it's the basics that most people need for their applications.
Awesome. And so this is, how long of an event is this?
Yeah, so both our course, both Jimmy's course and my course is 2 days long. I think we both start at the same time too and end at the same time. I think it's 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. For mine, and I forget what Jimmy's is. It might be 8:30 to 4 p.m. or something like that. But they're very, very similar in time because we pretty much teach you the same stuff. We just teach you it in a little bit different way. So Jimmy will teach you the underlying cryptography of it, and then I'll teach you how to actually work with it within the library, within the NBitcoin library itself. So I'll be able to tell you, for example, I'll give an example. So in the NBitcoin library, an actual standard pay to key transaction is the same as a SegWit transaction. So in Jimmy's course, he would teach you the actual underlying fundamental differences between these transactions. But in NBitcoin sees them essentially as the same type of transaction, because a regular developer, an application developer, when he's accepting Bitcoin, he doesn't care if it's from SegWit address, right? Or if it's from a regular address. He just wants to receive that Bitcoin. And so the library abstracts that complexity away. You don't actually have to know, that SegWit transaction is actually technically different than a regular transaction. You just want to make a transaction. And so the NBitcoin library, again, abstracts that away. So it's the same. It's, you type in new, open, transaction, open paren, close paren, whether you're trying to create a SegWit transaction or a regular transaction.
So then how does it know the difference? Or like, does it force everybody onto SegWit or what?
Oh, no. So you can specify as well. So you can just say new transaction. And so, for example, if it's receiving a SegWit, or if you're creating by default, So by default, it does do SegWit. So if you do, new transaction, it will be a SegWit transaction by default, unless you specify otherwise. So if you did want to create a regular transaction, you always have the capability to do that. But by default, the complexities are abstracted away for you.
Gotcha. Very cool. And so if somebody wanted to take this course, what are kind of the prerequisite? How much do they have to know before this will apply to them?
Sure. So we are asking that you have at least an intermediate experience with C#. So we're asking a good year or two. You just have to really be familiar with the ins and outs of .NET and how C# interacts. So you have to, the actual class itself is all command line based, because we teach you the basics so that you can then, integrate into your application. So, the most that you need on the C# side is only about a year or two of experience tops, where you don't have to be an expert developer to begin integrating Bitcoin, into your applications. You just have to know the ins and outs of C# and understand the basic concepts of programming. For example, the basic building blocks, right? Like the if, then, for, loops, things like that. Just, the basic concepts of programming. And then, on the Bitcoin side, you actually don't have to know really anything at all, because we're going to teach you the fundamentals of Bitcoin. So that's what the course starts out with, is actually teaching you about Bitcoin itself. So about what a transaction is, what mining is, these types of things, what a full node is and how to run it. We teach you, we go through all those fundamentals first, just to make sure that we're all on the same page of what Bitcoin really is, or at least the concept of it, of how you're going to use it within the scope of the class. And so it is really, we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. We really are. And so there's not a whole lot of experience that's really needed, just the basics of C#.
Well, that's really nice. Cause then if I had a company and I said, hey, I want our company to be able to accept Bitcoin on our application, but I don't know anything about Bitcoin. And I've got a C# developer on my team who may or may not really know much about Bitcoin. I can just send them to this workshop and you're teaching them enough about Bitcoin to be able to work with it. Absolutely.
We're going to definitely go through the fundamentals and answer anybody's questions too, because Bitcoin does kind of get a little complex, but we try to simplify it in a way that really makes sense for people who understand computer science and people who understand networks, right? Who have the basics there. And so we try to frame it in a way that a sort of a computer programmer can understand it.
Now, do you guys get into you mentioned earlier for yourself, like Austrian Economics or any of that side of it, or is it strictly technical?
So it is going to be strictly technical, but of course, being such a big fan of Austrian Economics, I'm certainly going to throw some of that stuff in there. I'm definitely going to talk about sound money. I do have one slide on sound money, so I get a little bit into it, but it's really, really brief, and I'm definitely more than happy to answer anybody's questions about that. If they want to go into that, we can go into that in a little bit more depth.
Cool. Now, this is something I've been seeing a lot lately. I don't know, over the past couple of years, is this kind of non-institutional but very practical education, and I think a lot of stuff is moving that way. I mean, besides not just Bitcoin, but just in general, these either a move back to like technical and vocational schools, but also just a move to non-university type education. What kind of educational background do you have, or are you self-taught, or I'm just curious about that?
Sure. So I have a bunch to say on that. So a few things is that I don't have a college background. I actually am 100% self-taught. So I've been, playing with video games and with programming since I was just a child. I was creating Doom levels, that was on my 486. That was pretty great. So I pretty much, I'm 100% self-taught. And really, when it comes to the modern age, when we have the sum of human knowledge at our fingertips, right? When we have the entire internet and the information age, there's really not a whole lot of reason to kind of go the traditional college route. For a couple different reasons. One is that things move so fast in the information technology world that colleges just have no way to keep up at all. And, it's just a horrible idea to try to expect these centralized institutions to keep up with the latest and the greatest of all these technologies. The second thing is that these institutions are becoming so expensive. There is just a huge bubble and I mean a huge bubble that's been building over the past couple of decades with this, with these colleges. It's basically like one of the biggest bubbles that we have. We're kind of in the everything bubble, but that's getting into a little bit more into the economics. But there is definitely a college bubble there and a college debt bubble there. And I think that people are starting to become more and more aware of it. But then, specifically when it comes to software, when it comes to building things on the computer, whether that is programming, whether that is design, whether that's even audio, making video games, graphics, whatever it is, when it comes to making stuff on the computer, there is just unlimited amounts of information, unlimited. So whether you want to go into audio engineering, make music, or make sound effects, just insane amounts of tutorials available across the place, across the web, on a number of different big sites like Pluralsight, right? That's a big one. There's a bunch of these, Udemy. There's a bunch of these online ones that are now really big that can teach you pretty much anything to do with building something on the computer. So really at this point, all you have to do is to follow your passion, right? Whatever you like to do, whether that's design, audio, programming, anything, creative that you like to do, you can pretty much do on the computer these days. And because of that, there is now tutorials to do anything you want to do. So short of like being a doctor, right, a lawyer, or any of that, and even that, I mean, is a lot of that information is now online,
Yeah, I was going to say,
lawyer.
So I'm a nurse, and I would say pretty much all of that information is still available. Because I was talking to someone the other day about this. You can go on Amazon and you can buy any of the textbooks that we have to read for school. You can go, there's YouTube channels, a lot of the foundational stuff's on like even Khan Academy, right? Like you can get any of that information. Where the roadblocks are is that most states have their board, whether it's doctor or nurse or whatever, like have their board of nursing or their board of medicine that requires you to take the licensing exam. And most of the licensing exam proctor groups, whatever you want to call them, require you to have a degree from a school that is certified. And so it's not about knowledge or even really what it is like you're blocked from getting the internships or experience or whatever you want to call it, and you're blocked from taking the licensing exams unless you can prove that you went to one of these sanctioned schools.
Absolutely. And that's sort of the world we live in right now. And that has a lot to do with in finance as well. It's the same way. So, even though, like you say, all this information is available online. And so what I think that is that just takes time. That just takes a generational change for people to understand that we can really find a huge amount of information online. And there's going to be more and more online available schools that will, quote unquote, have some kind of certification that will please these people. Because again, the bubble is going to pop for these colleges, and where do you think all that money is going to go? It's going to go to these proven websites, these proven modern education systems that are far, far better than the traditional ones. And most of them, of course, are all online. That is the delivery method, is through the web browser. That is how we deliver everything these days, whether it's, any kind of information, whether it's media, music, TV, whatever. This is where the information is streamed from. So in my opinion, I think it's only a matter of time, but there is going to have to be a generational change before these people, for example, start lifting regulational barriers, right? Requiring only from certified schools, because that is a racket. I mean, let's be honest here. It's a complete racket, monopoly, centralized way of doing things. And that just doesn't work in an information world, right? In an information era, that just, in an information age, that just doesn't play ball. So eventually they will just have to, basically succumb to the pressure of people not wanting to use, not wanting to get certified or going a different route or not wanting to use the colleges. The market is going to decide. Yeah,
I agree. And, it's so goofy because, we're getting philosophical here, but that's fine with me. People, I think, have this fear when you talk about this, especially on a medical side. And don't get me wrong, like I think you should have, I don't think you can get, having worked in the healthcare industry, like I don't think you can gain all of the required skills just by reading a book or watching a video. Like some of it you just got to do, and you've got to get that skill. But for the hospitals and whatever to not allow you to come in without the degree or the sanction of a school,
Yep, absolutely.
Right, is where the roadblock is. And so, and if you look back in the history, right, a lot of hospitals had their own nursing certification programs. They were built into the hospitals, and then eventually they got abstracted away into these universities. And man, where was I going with that?
It's a great point.
Like people think that you like if you didn't have these requirements for licensing or whatever, that you'd have, I don't know, surgeons hacking off people's limbs for no reason or something like that. You immediately go to the fear and the worst case scenario. But I think the reality is, you might have a little of that here and there, but people don't, it's like people use Amazon reviews and Yelp all the time, but they just can't wrap their mind around using that kind of system for anything else. It's like, no one would go to a doctor who had a horrible reputation if they knew about it.
That's right. That's right. And again, I think some of these problems can be solved with technology. In fact, I think most of these problems can be solved with technology, but it will take a generational change for people to be able to remove their trust from these centralized entities to something more like a decentralized solution. It's going to be difficult because people are used to having their hand held, but the fact of the matter is that these centralized institutions, they make mistakes too. And when they make mistakes, nobody hears about it, really. It takes years for something like some type of institution like that to finally find out where something went wrong. So they have to do all sorts of investigations and things like that, right? So when we have technology, for example, modern communication systems, we can talk to people really easily. We can find out some information about them. If you go to their LinkedIn, you can see things really simply. So I think that there will be a way eventually for people to prove their skills and for people to be able to trust that that proof is real. And really, it's probably going to be tied to Bitcoin, right? Because there's only two, like Trace Mayer likes to say, there's only two things that are scarce in this universe, and that is time and Bitcoin. So you're going to have to tie everything eventually as it relates to time and space to Bitcoin. So more than likely, some of these systems, these reputational systems in the future will be cryptographically signed to Bitcoin so that we can prove that this actually happened. But again, this is the world moving more towards local instead of global. So even though we have this internet that's going global, it's allowing us to actually, it's allowing us, if you wanted to, it can allow you to actually discover your local area much more, right? You can discover places that you never knew was right down the block. So if you use it properly, you can find out that the internet actually can bring things more local, and that's really important because when you start going completely global, you start trusting global solutions, and then that centralizes, right, to things like the World Bank and other things. Because again, like you say, Josh, it's the fear that that creeps in. Oh no, a world crisis! What would we do? If inflation set off, what would we do? The worst, we can't fix this, right? We have to have some kind of central entity to hold our hand, to make sure, some kind of central bank to set the interest rates. Oh, okay, now everything is going to be okay, right? So it's this general mindset that has to change, and that's going to come with generational change, but it will be made possible through technologies like the internet and Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're talking about on the bringing things more local. I think about there's several little restaurants and shops and stuff here in my town that, because of where they're at, they're kind of off the beaten path, or they have small signage or whatever, and I never would have noticed them until I saw, an ad somewhere on social media or something like that. It's like, oh, that's right here. I can go check
Absolutely.
that out.
And I think that's what will happen with like these types of reputational systems, because reputation is local. Reputation is not global. Reputation is local. It is, if there is a good doctor, then you're going to only know by people in that area, right? People in that area that have been served by that doctor. If there's the same with a dentist or anything, reputation is always local. And now that we have technology to be able to have proof and accessibility to this information, now all we have to do is localize it, and people are doing that. So I think that's going to be very powerful in the future, much more powerful than it is now. We're sort of seeing the share economy, right? Like with Uber and Airbnb, we're sort of seeing that, the prelude to it, but that's what's going to be made possible, is we're going to get more local through technology.
Okay, so let's back up a second. When we were talking about education and educational paths, if you had to talk to someone, say like a middle school or high school kid who said, I want to learn enough that I can take your course, what resources would you point someone to, or what skills would they need to learn kind of as stepping stones along the way? Because I know that people talk about, go on and, if you have the financial resources or something, take programming with, Jimmy Song's course. And now you and Nicola have this programming with Bitcoin, but there's a lot of steps if I don't meet those minimum requirements, right? Like if I don't know C#, let's say I've got, basic algebra or whatever, middle school, high school math enough that I can learn how to program, but I don't know any programming.
Yeah, that's what's beautiful about the internet is that you now, with the sum of the entire, human information at your fingertips, you decide your destiny. And not only do you decide your destiny, but you decide the pace at which this destiny comes to you, right? So you can take a couple of years and, not learn and learn programming slowly. Or you could just rush in and learn right away and get in there and get a job right away. It's all up to you. So there is no barriers to information anymore. And so that's what's just beautiful because of the internet. There is no more barriers. And now, like you say, our courses, of course, is a little bit more expensive, right? Jimmy's and my course, because it's for people that that want to take it a little bit more serious. They want to get a little bit more serious when it comes to developing with Bitcoin. Because what our courses are, they're really kind of like boot camps. We teach you a lot of information in those 2 days. It's kind of like taking a full college course in 2 days. So if that's not what you're looking for, like you say, there has to be some kind of prelude to that. There has to be some kind of introductory step to take before you can go there, right? So there, again, I'll say the internet. So we have so many websites. The best one that I like to recommend people to go for learning C# is learncs.org. Learn CS is in C#, learncs.org. That is great because they actually have a web browser based compiler. So you can write the code right there in the browser. So it's like, hey, create an array. Okay. Write it out right there. Click play. Bam. You can see if there's an error or if it works. So right there in the web browser, just, tutorial after tutorial right there, you can run and test all within the browser. So you can learn really quickly with a setup like that. But otherwise, of course, there's a ton of videos out there. There's just a ton of videos. So you can go to Pluralsight, pluralsight.com. They just have a ton of amazing videos, whether it's C# or C++, whatever you want to learn. And then, of course, YouTube, right? YouTube has so many free stuff for whatever you want, whether it's C#, audio, graphic design, whatever you want to do, web development, protocol development, it's all there. Again, the choice is completely up to you. I'm looking at a video right now that says how to program in C# the basics tutorial, has 1.2 million freaking views, guys. 1.2 million views. This is the knowledge is there, guys. There's no more barrier to entry. If you want to do something with software development, if you want to do something with Bitcoin, there is no barrier. All you have to do is go and learn. You just have to do it, right? Like Shia LaBeouf, all the memes, right? Just do it. That's all you have to do. It's right there. And so I really encourage your audience and anybody listening to become aware of this fact that if you want to change your destiny, if you don't like your job, if you don't like how things are playing out, then you can change it right now at any time by just going to Google whatever you want to do. And again, the biggest thing is just to follow your passion. Maybe you don't even want to program, right? But maybe you still want to work with Bitcoin. So what I tell people to do is to just do what you love, but do it with Bitcoin. So if you're a graphic designer, maybe do some graphic designs for Bitcoin, or do some work for graphic design work in Bitcoin, get paid in Bitcoin, or maybe do graphic design work about Bitcoin. There's just a million infinite ways to do. And that's the beauty of it, is that it's all up to you. It's up to your imagination. You decide how it's going to play out. It's up to you. It's your path. Everybody has their own hero journey. And really, it's never been a better time to be a self-sovereign individual, to have this type of information at your fingertips, to have self-sovereign money like Bitcoin at your fingertips. Again, only a few years ago, this type of security was only available to billionaires, right? Who would use JP Morgan to transfer their wealth offline to the Cayman Islands off coast. All these crazy off the shore places that they go ahead and keep their money in to save money from taxes. Now, we have that ability to hold our money that nobody can confiscate, that nobody can take, the first unconfiscatable asset. And so when you combine the power of the internet, right, with the power of Bitcoin, you just have a whole host, just a huge host of opportunity in front of you.
Yeah. Really, the thing is, at this point, like you said, all the barriers to entry are either gone or very, very low. And the only thing holding you back is yourself. Like you you still have to do work, right? That it's not
Right.
going to,
See,
these
and
things
that's
aren't going
why-
to program
see-
themselves. They're not going to draw themselves, whatever. But you have to find something that you enjoy enough that you are willing
Yes,
to work
absolutely.
on it.
That's the big thing. See, because whatever you do, you better make sure it's your passion, because whatever you're going to do, whatever work you're going to do, there's going to take a crap load of work. It takes a crap load of work to do anything. So you better be liking it, because, for example, software development, it's not easy, right? Graphic design, it's not easy. Healthcare industry, it's not easy to learn all this stuff. So whatever you do, just make sure that you are passionate about it, because you will be doing a whole lot of work on it in order to, learn more about it, to become better at it, and to hopefully build maybe a career or a name, in it as well.
So so on that, like a career and a name, if someone was, say, they've taken a couple of courses on Learn CS or programming starting out, what is a good way? And I know this is kind of an open-ended and it depends on what you want and all that stuff, but like, how do you market yourself in that situation?
So, it's all about what you want to do. So do you want to have a job? Do you want to have a career, right? Or do you want to have a calling? So it's all about what you want to do, and you're free to do whatever you want. So if you just want to sort of get by and get a paycheck, then you get a job, right? If you want to maybe do more and kind of dive into a specialization of something and but still get a paycheck, still have that guaranteed paycheck, then you get a career, right? But if you want to do something big that you think is going to help humanity, and in so doing help yourself, then you find your calling. So there's many people that have found their calling that and when you find your calling, what ends up happening is you end up becoming so passionate about it and working so hard at it that you almost always are taken care of some way or another. And so this is what you find in a lot of entrepreneur stories, right? You ask them, like, how did you become so rich? And they're like, well, I found a problem and I was passionate about solving it. I wanted this problem to be solved. The solution did not exist. So I manifested it into reality, right? They executed. That's what it really takes. And so, that's what it really takes to do anything is persistence and passion. So if it doesn't matter how smart you are, if you're not very talented at all, it doesn't matter. If you have the passion and you have the persistence, you will absolutely crush all in your path, any resistance that comes your way. And so that's the key. So if you find your passion, then it's all about executing, right? And so we have the internet, like we've been talking about. There's just so many ways to present yourself, to build your brand online, right? So we have things like Twitter, we have things like Instagram, YouTube to build your own channel, and now we have sites like Patreon to be able to build a following that way, to be able to build a paying audience for in support of what you want to do. And so when you find your calling, that's where things start getting magical. That's where you start coming up with ideas like, maybe I should use a Patreon for this, have a Bitcoin address for this, and then if I help this way with this much information, then maybe somebody can give back this way, and it just compounds on itself. And so at the end of the day, you kind of got to ask, to follow your passion, you got to ask, how can you help? And when you start asking that question, then you start finding answers, and the answers are what you have to execute on. So it takes time, but the biggest thing is again, find out what you love, find out how you can help others doing what you love, and then from there everything sort of falls into place.
Yeah. And you don't have to fully choose one or the other in some sense, because, like I said, I've got a day job, right, which has the stability and the consistent paycheck, right? But I do this on the side, right? So this is how I give back to the community, and I get to have conversations with people who are a lot smarter than me about Bitcoin, and then I get to share that with other people. But so if that's your thing, or you can be part of things like open source projects like BTC Pay or something like that on at night too, if that's what at least for a while, until you ramp it up enough to branch out and actually make money off
the
something.
point is that something will always lead to something if you're following your passion. So if you're doing this on the side, you might just find a business opportunity or something that might give you life-changing money and have you quit your day job, right? So it's all about doing what you love. And if you truly love this, then there will be some way that the universe essentially allows you to do it. If you have a passion to do something, then that means that there's somebody on the other end that wants to hear it. If you have something to say, somebody will want to hear it because you're passionate about it. Therefore, by default, somebody else has to be passionate about it as well. So you will find your audience when you find your passion. And, like I say, you can do both. But hey, if you're following your passion, just give it some time, and you may find out that you might not have to do your day job very much longer.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess I'm probably not the best example because I don't hate
Sure.
my day job either. Like I enjoy the healthcare side of things too. So I guess if I was working in some horrible cubicle farm, I would probably be looking for more of an exit than I am.
You'd be looking for an opportunity, which it would be in the back of your head. So you would be thinking about it and be able to recognize it, right? But right now you're absolutely happy following your passion. So, that means you're good to go. And there's really nothing else you got to do except continue to doing what you love.
Yeah. Okay, well let's shift gears. What are you excited about for the future of Bitcoin?
Man, so many things. There's so many things coming down the pipeline. It's really tough because, a lot of people are like, Vortex, like, how can you only follow Bitcoin? And I try to tell them, how can you follow anything else? There is so much information and innovation coming out of Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis that now we have multiple mailing lists with all this technology to keep up with it. Because I got a Lightning Network mailing list. I got a Schnorr mailing list. I got the regular Bitcoin mailing list. Then I got people's interpretations like the Optech list as well. So there's just so much information popping out these days that it's really hard to keep up. But what really is exciting, what everybody's sort of working on right now, what everybody's really excited about is the Lightning Network. That's the next big thing for Bitcoin because that is an order of magnitude improvement. And you just don't get that with Bitcoin anymore because it's so, mature at this point. You're lucky to get like 5 or 10% wins by optimizing something right here or there. But now with Lightning, that's just an order of magnitude. We're talking millions and millions and millions of transactions per second. So that's just a big obvious win. So that's what sort of is the majority of the ecosystem is working on right now. But check it out. There's a whole lot of stuff within Lightning, though, as well. It gets crazy because, they're working on all sorts of things. They're working on multipath payments, right? Atomic multipath payments. They're working on atomic swaps to be able to transfer coin from one chain to another on top of Lightning so that it's instant. They're working on submarine swaps, right? So you can transfer coin from within a Lightning channel back to the on-chain without having to open and close the channel. They're working on there's just so many things within Lightning that it's crazy just within Lightning. But then, in addition to that, there is amazing privacy tech coming down the pipeline. We got people working on Schnorr signatures, which is a huge privacy win. We got people working on confidential transactions, which is a little bit farther out, but still really, really cool. And then we had the very, very first Chaumium swap on the Chaumium transaction, the Chaumium CoinJoin transaction on the live mainnet from Nopara 73's Wasabi wallet. And I think they had 6 or 7 people in that particular CoinJoin transaction. And now I think he's had like 20 or 30. The goal is to eventually have thousands and thousands. But what this does is it joins your coins with others and essentially mixes them together so that nobody can actually tell from the outside who originally sent what to who and how much they sent. So it ends up being a big privacy win for Bitcoin on chain. But there's just so much more coming down the line in addition to that. So it really becomes hard to kind of keep track of it all, but that's the big things that I'm excited about right now is really Schnorr. That's a big one. And then the privacy tech that we're working on, and then Lightning. That is the big one. And Lightning is privacy tech too, because it's encrypted by default. I mean, it is 100% encrypted from the beginning to the end. So nobody in the Lightning Network can see who paid who. Nobody outside of your channel. Sorry, they'd have to. Yeah.
Right. I was thinking like if you have a nefarious Lightning node, they can see.
So all a node can see when because it uses something similar to the onion, to what Tor does, right? The onion routing network. So all the each node can peel back is one little layer, which is where the next hop is supposed to be. So it gets their previous hop and where their next hop is supposed to be, and that's it. They have no information about the transaction information, who's it from, where is it going, the destination or the source. The only people that have the source and the destination information is the source and the destination. That's it.
Yeah. I'm also excited about the privacy stuff. I had Adam Gibson on recently, and that was a very cool talk. Just kind of, it's one of those nice talks where I just get to sit back and listen for the most part because he's very knowledgeable about all this stuff.
I like Simon Dixon for that too. Simon Dixon, man, you just wind him up and let him go. He'll talk for 15 minutes straight, easy every time, and it's just great because he can do that because it's nothing but pure signal, like just pure information, amazing stories. The guy's been in the space since the very, very, very beginning. Wrote the first ever book that talked about Bitcoin. Created Bank to the Future, the first ever basically like public investing company for blockchains. I mean, just one first after another first after another first. So the guy can just talk your ear off. And it's just every single time fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Okay, so let's what's the word I'm looking for here? Let's speculate. What if you had to look out like 10, 20 years, as far as society and culture related to Bitcoin development? What do you see, or what would you hope to see?
Boy, it's tough, man. Looking out that far. As you know, the crypto.
Yeah, I mean that's science fiction, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so let's talk some science fiction then, because that's basically what we're going to be doing.
I love it.
But yeah, no, it's tough because, as you know, and many of your audience probably knows as well, that the space moves so fast. When you're within the space, we're talking a couple months is like a year in pretty much any other industry. So it really does become 100% speculation when you're talking about even things like beyond a year. Really, just. Maybe let me give you a couple of grounded predictions first before we go crazy speculation. I really do believe that by the end of 2019, the entire crypto ecosystem will be on board with Lightning. So that means that every single exchange, every single wallet, it'll all be plugged in. That means most of the valuable blockchains as well will be plugged into the Lightning network, because it will become like this interoperable application layer above Bitcoin that everybody can connect to. I really foresee Lightning being like the World Wide Web on top of Bitcoin's internet of money. It really will be where everybody will, where all their applications will interact to produce results, right? To be able to do things with Bitcoin and any other blockchain. So I think that that's going to be really big. And then a couple of years out from that, you're once Lightning is completely settled within the ecosystem, then we can start looking at retail adoption, right? Merchant and retail adoption, like just huge, because now that we have Lightning, completely working, instant transactions across the planet, right? With the world's most secure money that the world has ever seen. That's when we can really start bringing and onboarding on the merchants. Now, people like Roger tried to do this a little early, right? They a few years probably too early, got a little upset, had to create Bitcoin Cash. But the fact of the matter is that Bitcoin is multifaceted. It is a medium exchange, a method of payment, store of value, all of these things. And so sometimes some of these properties just they're all building on each other simultaneously. So right. So in the beginning, it was a little bit more of a payment system, and now it's a bit more of a digital gold, but they're all still working together. And then with Lightning, now it can be a payment system again. See, so they're all working simultaneously together, all these properties to build the world's greatest money. But so at that time, like by 2021 or so, I think is when we can really onboard a whole bunch of merchants. From there, a couple of years after that, we're talking like, almost everybody is working with Bitcoin. Almost every single major business supports Bitcoin by 2024. And then, we're talking government starting to hold Bitcoin by 2026 or maybe even 2024. By 2028, it's all over. Bitcoin is over $1 million a coin. The whole financial industry would have what Andreas likes to say has been inverted. We call that infrastructure inversion, where the entire set of infrastructure will have now been flipped on top of Bitcoin, just like the entire telephony and communication system now has turned on to TCP/IP, is now runs over the top of the internet. That's what will happen. That's how I see it all playing out. And it's going to play out over decades, really. That might be conservative, slightly conservative. Even it might happen faster than that. But that's kind of how I seeing it playing out. When it comes to development, I mean, I see it just continuing to evolve. Like we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of developers and contributors working on this project, coming from all over the world. It is only getting more and more involved. More and more people are learning about this. It really is becoming like this, what I like to call a global financial renaissance. The humanity as a species is redefining, reimagining what we understand money to be. And really, we're kind of reimagining our relationship to each other because money touches everything, all facets of life. Then when we rethink money, we have to rethink other facets of life as well, And so this is just really a great transformative time, and it's one of the greatest times, in my opinion, to be alive. Really, like I say, it is a global financial renaissance. So it's going to play out over decades, going to take some generational changes, but I think by 2028, it'll be boring to talk about because it will have completely penetrated the planet.
Yeah. Do you think, like, at what point do you think, or do you think it'll happen where altcoins all just kind of fall apart, or at least go down in price? I guess at some point, if it really takes off, then right, nothing will be valued in US dollars anymore. It'll be valued in Bitcoin. But do you think there's a point where it gets so low that it's basically not even worth talking about anymore?
Well, so there's always going to be penny stocks, and there's always going to be gambling, and there's always going to be speculation. So you're not going to ever see altcoins, the idea of altcoins, go away. Now, the idea of penny stocks, of course, manifested themselves again in the form of altcoins. But when altcoins probably inevitably go away, or at least all start connecting to the Lightning Network, then people will think of other ways to speculate and things like that. So that's going to never go away. But the ultimate, way to pay the underlying payment system for the world, the underlying world store value that powers not just money, but also time, will be Bitcoin, because we're going to eventually switch to Bitcoin time, because Bitcoin time, again, there's only two scarce things, right? Time and Bitcoin. And there's only one thing that we can prove with absolute certainty, and that's math. And Bitcoin allows us to really create a user interface around this. And so we can prove when things happen. And so I think we're going to switch to Bitcoin time instead of, the standard time that we have now that's sort of off by, milliseconds to an hour, depending on where you're getting the source from. With Bitcoin, we have that heartbeat every 10 minutes. So we always know we're always in sync. So it's really tough to kind of speculate to have this play out. But I think that's how it's going to go.
Yeah, of course, we need to solve the Unicode issue on Bitcoin time before we switch the rest of our lives over to it.
That would probably be a good idea, right? I think, what is that, 2039 or 2042? When we have to start worrying about that. But we can soft fork that away pretty simply. And in fact, I think Jameson Lopp actually got corrected by Peter Woolley or somebody like that who actually corrected him, because I think Lopp said that we have that it's a big problem by 2040, but I believe he was corrected saying that we can either soft fork that away or it's pretty much already been solved for the most part in a BIP.
Yeah, I think it will probably not be a controversial thing once they go, here's how we do it.
Yep.
But I think people will talk about it for a while of how to do it.
I think there's going to be a lot more FUD around it, just like there's FUD around the halving,
for
FUD
sure.
around SegWit. They're going to try to drop it crazy, but in reality, the developers, it's going to be a simple thing.
Yeah, what I don't hear people talk about much, but I think will happen is, I think Bitcoin adoption, as it moves more globally, I think it's going to push infrastructure development into places that don't have much infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I'm talking about like high-speed internet and things like that, because, I see people you could take Roger, but you could take other people too that I think are a little more genuine, who talk about, altcoins and faster transactions are better for these underdeveloped countries or whatever. And at some point it's just like, but they don't have the internet infrastructure right now to really be able to support that. So it doesn't help them, because a guy, and I'm grossly generalizing here, right? But, a guy in a shack is not going to accept your digital money for physical goods. Like, I just don't see that happening right now. But once you get things like, using maybe even alternative things besides the internet, right? Like, so satellite or shortwave radio or something like that built out, then I think that becomes more of a reality.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really crazy because, you do have these people going around kind of telling people that, Bitcoin BCH is better, or other coins with faster transactions are better. But, Jimmy just wrote this great article about this, that people are just trying to shortcut this stuff, right? They're trying to shortcut truth. And at the end of the day, it's not going to work. The emperor is going to have no clothes. People are going to realize eventually that these things are scams and pretty much Ponzi's, because what people need is a store of value. They need a money that they can store their value in for their children, their children's children, and all the generations to come. They need the ability to be able to transfer their value in a secure way and hold that value in a very secure way. So I think that, Bitcoin is going to help the third world far more than, any type of coin that claims to have faster transactions. What people really need, of course, is a store of value. Now, with Lightning Network, we can do that. It's not to the point yet where it can be easily done with mobile phones, but eventually that will be the case. Because remember, all these world-changing technologies, cell phones, computers, internet, all this stuff, it all starts with the rich. It all starts with the first world, and then what happens is we refine it, we commoditize it, and it can eventually then be available for everybody. And so we've seen this play out time and time and time again. So where we are right now is mobile phones there's billions of them. Right, there's tons of them in third world countries, and so when you combine something like that with something that somebody needs, like with minutes, right, the actual times to speak on that, you can get a currency out of that, and that's what M-Pesa is kind of doing down there in Africa. So they essentially have a currency with a mobile phone. Now, not everybody in Africa has a mobile phone, right? So that only works in select areas. And so from then on out, you have to get creative, right? People are going to have to get creative. And I think that they will when they discover how of a sound money Bitcoin is. When the world discovers that that it really is a digital gold, they're going to set up solar powered mobile phones. They're going to set up solar powered setups so that they can store their money, store their wealth in this money. So instead of, in M-Pesa, or instead of whatever their local currency is that's getting destroyed, right, by printed to oblivion, like Zimbabwe, they'll have something. And we're creating all sorts of technologies to make this easier. I mean, there's the Open Dime stick that allows you to store Bitcoin with just a piece of hardware that you can transfer and hand around like a digital bearer instrument, like cash, like actual cash. You can just hand that around and the Bitcoin is on there. And of course, there's wallets that are completely text-based, so you actually don't even need a graphical user interface. You could just have phones that support text, and you can use Bitcoin that way. But the point is that it's so early to have anybody be claiming, like Roger, that their coin can just save the third world is just ridiculous. The technology is not there yet. We're not ready to scale to the whole planet. No blockchain is ready to scale to the whole planet. But this stuff is coming because companies like PayPal and Apple are not going to serve these people. They're not going to serve these third world countries that really need Bitcoin. And so eventually what's going to happen is, just like everything else in Bitcoin, it's going to be grassroots. Just like everything with the internet. People walked for miles and miles with cable to get remote villages hooked up to the internet. They carried huge satellites on their back up mountains to have villages connect to the internet, because they knew that email was so important, that communication was a fundamental thing that humanity needs. We need to be able to be keeping in touch with each other. And so, when just like the fundamental need to be able to communicate with somebody else, the fundamental need to store your value in something that doesn't get inflated away will be understood universally and will be serviced. There will be demand, and there will be people that are willing to spend their time and their money and sacrifice whatever it takes to create this grassroots organization, to create this grassroots movement that will bring Bitcoin to the people who need it most.
Yeah, and a couple of things too on that is, like, some of it is too, like, when you have countries where these things are not developed to begin with, right? And I've spent some time in Africa, and again, it depends on where you go in Africa, right? There are more developed areas and less developed areas, but there's a lot of people there, with phones and stuff, but a lot of it did not go through like the bag phone era. Right, like we had in the late 80s and early 90s here in America. Yep. Like, yeah, they leapfrog to a point where now a lot of people, if you're in an area that's a bigger city or whatever, you've got an Android phone or an iPhone there. Those do exist, and now you're starting to see, with the proliferation of things like I don't know how familiar you are with Ubiquity as like Wi-Fi and point-to-point internet systems. They can shoot these point-to-point internet signals, miles and miles and miles, and so you're not having to actually run lines across these areas where they, whether it's natural or man-made issues getting, cutting cables and things like this. Yeah, that's huge. You just don't have to deal with that anymore. And then what was the other thing? Oh, I mean, and then some of it too. Now, I was never in an area that had these big ideological, like, political turmoil things, but some of it too, you're going to have to, it will have to come once there's a shift in certain cultures who want, I think some of this has to come from a culture that wants freedom and wants economic prosperity, because until you get that, you're going to still end up with places like Venezuela. Well, and hopefully we'll see in our lifetime a shift in Venezuela. But I think countries like that, where the people in power hold that power, and until that changes, you're not going to have this kind of development.
Yeah, it's also interesting too how the privacy aspect plays into it, because these technologies, some of these technologies to be able to bring internet to these third world countries, internet and Bitcoin, are also used for privacy aspects, right? Like, so for example, bringing Bitcoin to a remote village via satellite is great for prosperity, to be able to help these people get access. But it's also good for people who want privacy, who don't want to connect to a main internet, to a main ISP, and still want to use Bitcoin. So there's going to be privacy tech that actually intersects with this, that's going to help this grassroots movement of getting more and more people access to Bitcoin. It's just the internet itself is driving, like Andreas said, I mean, Bitcoin is the third wave of the internet. It's still a part of the internet, and the internet is just going to continue to expand. And though the growth has slowed over the years, with Bitcoin, the internet can pay for itself. You can have a job and get paid through the internet and pay for that internet. So because the internet can now pay for itself, now that it has its own native currency, I think it's the expansion is going to jump up again when you combine that with the advancement that we have in technology with these smaller computers and these smaller phones and these smaller radios and smaller satellites and on and on and on, like just the range that we're getting and just the evolution of technology in general. When you combine these things, you can really only see good things coming in the future. You can really only see like a positive movement.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some setbacks though. Like, I think there might come a point where if, and not to be a Debbie Downer, but I think we were talking about other, satellite and these other technologies. I think it's important to develop those as well, because not too long ago, and I'm trying to remember, and maybe it was in Venezuela or maybe it was somewhere else, kind of South America, but there was news stations and internet that got cut off for a couple of days, and it was just like nobody was allowed to communicate on that front. And so until these alternative communication routes are set up to be able to handle Bitcoin transactions and things like that, a country could cut their citizens off from being able to use Bitcoin.
Right. So we've seen countries shut down internet specifically to like protests, right? Through an entire protested area, and how they've survived by using something like mesh networks. So when there's a need, humanity will provide a solution, right? When there's a demand, the market will provide a solution. So I think eventually it's just a matter of time before these technologies start to take off more and more, before people want more and more independence with their internet and not depending on a centralized source for that internet. I think as the awareness grows more and more, the technology will be right there waiting, evolving with it.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, we're at an hour here.
Yeah, it's great
what's
conversation.
Next? Yeah, no, this is good. I think this is kind of a good point. Unless you've got more to say on that.
Well, I could talk for days, man. So it's all up to you. But no, I'm having a great time. Definitely.
So what's next for you? I mean, I know you've got this. I guess programming with Bitcoin is kind of the next big thing for you.
Yeah. So the two big things that I'm focused on mostly right now with all of my time is the CryptoCast YouTube channel. And the programmingwithbitcoin.com workshop. So those are my two main ventures that I'm going to be, putting most of my time into. I still have a couple other side things too, and helping other people and things like that. But those are my two big ventures, and the ones that I really want people to know about the most is CryptoCast.network and programmingwithbitcoin.com. And I hope to evolve those as well to have more shows on the network and then reach more cities with the workshop. And the whole goal is to raise awareness, more and more awareness about Bitcoin. With the network to raise more awareness about Bitcoin and how it works, and then with the workshop to raise more awareness about Bitcoin to developers specifically, because Bitcoin we really just need more and more people working with Bitcoin. We need more application developers. Protocol development is great, but it's very, very specialized. We need more regular application developers, more web developers just working with Bitcoin. And I hope to be able to bring that to fruition, make that a reality with this workshop.
Very cool. Okay, so besides those two websites, how can people keep up with you online?
Sure. So I tweet probably too much. You can always find me on Twitter at twitter.com/the1vortex, all spelled out. And of course, you can find my website at the1vortex.com, all spelled out. And then again, the YouTube channel is CryptoCast.network, or you could just search for CryptoCast Network on YouTube or Google. You'll find it because we're on Twitter, Instagram, and all that good stuff. So yeah. definitely. You could just pretty much search Vortex and Bitcoin and probably find me.
Yeah. Very cool. All right, man. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We'll have to do this again sometime.
For sure, man. Anytime.
All right, and everybody, the show notes will be, this is episode 28, so it'll be at bottomshelfbitcoin.com/28. Vortex, thanks for coming on.
You bet, man. Anytime. Hope to talk to you soon. Have a great day.
All right, gang, that's our show. Be sure and go check out Vortex's stuff. Go check out CryptoCast Network, and go check out the Programming with Bitcoin workshop that he and Nicola are doing. And good stuff all around. As always, one of the best things you can do to support the show is leave me a good review on iTunes or Stitcher. I noticed, I checked a couple days ago, and there are some reviews in, so thank you for whoever reviewed the show. Appreciate that. I did notice a 3-star review with no comment. So if that was you, don't have to out yourself. I don't even need to know who you are, but give me some feedback. Why is it 3 stars and not 5? Because if you don't tell someone how they can do something better, you can't expect them to do anything better. So yeah, I like to think I take constructive criticism pretty well. I'm not going to go cry. So tell me what I can do better. You guys may have seen, I posted the other day on Twitter and I believe on Mastodon, and then Bitcoin Shirt reposted it, but I got a store set up on the site. I got these patches, finally got them up for sale. And so if you want to buy a Bottom Shelf Bitcoin patch and help support the show, they're up right now. You can only purchase them with Bitcoin. So, I mean, they're not expensive. They're cheap. So, I'm successfully using BTC Pay server, and you can buy a patch and I will mail it to you. If you are international, I'm sorry, right now I haven't got the international shipping figured out yet. So US and Canada only right now. But buy a patch, slap it on something Velcro, wear it around, support the show, and everyone will go, wow, you are so cool. You have a patch that says, or it doesn't say anything, it's just got the logo, the neon blue over black. Anyway, you can go to the site and check it out and see what it looks like. I don't know why I'm rambling here. There's pictures. Anyways, the rest of the stuff you guys know. You can support me, bottomshelfbitcoin.com/donate, and bottomshelfbitcoin.com/kidsbook if you want a Tuttle Twins book. Those are great books. Check me out on social media. I'm on Twitter at bottomshelfbtc. Same handle on Instagram, and same handle on the Bitcoin Hackers instance of Mastodon. I'm on those 3 places. So send me a message if you've got an idea of someone you think should be on the show, and or if you think there's something I could be doing better, or something that needs to be dropped, or whatever. All right, from Bottom Shelf Bitcoin, I'm Josh Humphrey. Thanks for listening.